The phone rang at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I know the exact time because I had been lying awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling the way I had been doing most nights for the past few months. And I had just looked at the clock on the bedside table. The red numbers glowed 11:47. Then my mobile buzzed on the nightstand and my daughter's name lit up the screen. Rebecca. She never called this late. My youngest had always been the careful one, the organized one, the one who scheduled everything in advance and sent reminder texts the day before. A call at this hour meant something was wrong. I picked up before the second ring. Dad. Her voice was low and controlled, the way she sounded in court. I had heard recordings of her arguing cases. She used that same tone now, and it made the hair on my arms stand up. I need you to listen to me very carefully and not say anything until I finish. Rebecca. What? Dad. Please. I closed my mouth. I need you to get up right now, quietly, and go to the downstairs bathroom. The one without windows facing the street. Lock the door from the inside. Take your phone, but don't turn on any lights until you're inside with the door locked. The clock read 11:48. Are you with anyone in the house right now? She asked. Your brother is here, I said. Daniel and Sandra are in the spare room. You know that. They've been... I know they're there, Dad. A pause. A very careful pause. That's why I need you in that bathroom. Now, please. I sat up slowly. My knees ached the way they always did after a cold day. And it had been a cold day in Christchurch. The kind of gray July cold that settles into old bones and stays there. I was 68 years old and I had lived in this house for 31 years, the house I had shared with my wife Patricia until she passed 4 years ago. It was my house. I had built the deck with my own hands. I had planted every tree in the back garden, and my daughter was telling me to hide in my own bathroom in the middle of the night. I moved quietly down the hall, one hand on the wall, not turning on any lights. The spare bedroom door was closed. I could hear nothing from behind it. I reached the bathroom, slipped inside, turned the lock. I'm in, I whispered. I heard Rebecca exhale. Okay, she said. Okay, Dad, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm, because I have already handled most of it. You don't need to do anything except stay where you are. Rebecca. You're frightening me. I know. I'm sorry. She took a breath. I have been working with a colleague here in Wellington, a solicitor who specializes in financial fraud. For the past 6 weeks, I didn't tell you because I needed to be certain before I said anything. 6 weeks. My daughter had been investigating something for 6 weeks and said nothing. Daniel has been transferring money from your account, she said. Small amounts at first. 200 here, 300 there. Then larger ones. He had access because you added him to the account after Mum died, when you said you didn't want to deal with the bank statements. I remembered that. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table 3 weeks after Patricia's funeral, the stack of unopened envelopes in front of me, and Daniel sitting across from me with his hand on my shoulder saying, Dad, let me take care of this for you. You don't need the stress right now. I had felt grateful. I had felt relieved. How much? I asked. Another pause. $64,000, Dad. Over 14 months. The bathroom wall was cold against my back. I realized I had pressed myself against it without knowing it. That's not the main reason I called tonight, Rebecca continued. There is a document Daniel had drawn up by a solicitor in Rangiora, not a reputable one. I've looked into him. The document is a full, enduring power of attorney, transferring all legal and financial decisions regarding you and your assets to Daniel and Sandra jointly. I never signed anything like that. I know you didn't. Her voice tightened slightly. Someone did, though. The signature on the document uses your name. Dad. Daniel has a meeting arranged with a real estate agent tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. For your house? I stared at the chrome towel rail on the opposite wall. Patricia had chosen it. She had spent 20 minutes in the hardware shop deciding between two nearly identical ones, and I had stood beside her pretending to have an opinion. He was going to sell the house, I said. He had an offer arranged already. A buyer he knew. A private sale, below market value, with settlement in 3 weeks. She paused. Dad, I need you to stay in that bathroom until I tell you otherwise. I have already been in contact with the New Zealand police. There are officers on the way to your house right now. They should arrive within 15 to 20 minutes. I did not speak for a long time. Daniel was my eldest. He was 51 years old. I had taught him to ride a bike in the driveway of this house. I had sat in the front row at his school certificate ceremony. I had driven 4 hours to Dunedin when his first marriage ended because he said he did not want to be alone. He's my son, I said. I know, Dad. Rebecca's voice cracked, just slightly, just once. I know he is. I should tell you how it came to this, because it did not happen all at once. Nothing this bad ever does. Patricia died of a stroke in March, 4 years before that night in the bathroom. She was 66, and it was unexpected, and it broke something in me that I am not sure has ever fully healed. We had been married 41 years. She was a school librarian, and she smelled like old books, and she laughed too loudly at things that were only slightly funny, and I had loved her every single day without exception. After the funeral, Daniel had suggested coming home for a while to help out. Just a month or two, he said. Just to make sure you're all right, Dad. Sandra was between jobs, and their flat in Auckland was expensive. It made sense to everyone at the time. It probably would have made sense to Patricia too, if she had been there to hear it. They moved in May. By August it felt permanent, though nothing was ever said directly. I did not press it. The house was large and quiet, and I was not good at being alone in it. What I did not see, what I would not let myself see for a long time, was what was happening around me, so gradually that each individual change seemed reasonable on its own. Daniel started handling the bills. That was the first thing. He had always been good with numbers, had worked in finance for 15 years before the redundancy the previous year, and I told myself it made sense to let him help. He set up automatic payments from my account. He explained them to me once, and I nodded and did not ask again. Then my old friends started coming around less. Not all at once. First it was Warren, my neighbor of 20 years, who I had played bowls with every Thursday. Daniel mentioned twice that Warren's dog had been getting into the garden again, and one afternoon I overheard Sandra telling Warren at the gate that I was resting and not up for visitors. I said nothing. I told myself I was tired. Then it was my friend Graham, who had been in my life since secondary school. Graham called me one Sunday, and I missed the call. And when I went to call him back, my phone showed his number had been deleted. I thought I must have done it myself somehow. I still thought that for a long time. The tablets came later. Daniel brought them home one afternoon in a white paper bag from the chemist. He said, my GP had recommended a supplement for older men, something for joint health and cognitive function. I had not been to see my GP about any supplements, but Daniel said the GP had mentioned it to him when he had stopped in on my behalf to collect a repeat prescription. And I thought perhaps I had forgotten, and my memory had been a little patchy in recent months, and I accepted the tablets without question. They did not look unusual. They were white, round, the size of an ordinary supplement. I took 2 each morning with breakfast, the way Daniel showed me. Within 6 weeks I was sleeping 12 hours a day. I was confused by things that had never confused me. I forgot appointments. I sat down to read a book I had been enjoying and could not follow the sentences. I thought it was grief. I thought it was age. I thought it was what happened to men who lost their wives. It was Rebecca who noticed first, though she did not know what she was noticing. She called every Sunday, and she began to hear something in my voice. A flatness, a slowness. She asked me what I had been doing and I struggled to answer. She asked if I was sleeping and I said yes, very well, much better than before. She asked what tablets I was taking, and I told her about the supplements Daniel had brought. And there was a silence on the line that lasted just a beat too long. She did not say anything then, but she started asking more careful questions in the weeks after, and she started paying attention to the answers. What she eventually found, with the help of a pharmacist friend in Wellington, was that the supplements Daniel had given me were not from any chemist. They contained a sedative compound used in veterinary medicine, combined with a substance that, taken over time, could cause confusion, memory impairment, and a documented decline that would look, on paper, very much like early-stage cognitive deterioration. My son had been drugging me for 3 months. I stopped taking the tablets in the second week of July, on Rebecca's quiet instruction. Without telling Daniel, she told me to tip them out each morning and wash the residue down the sink so that Daniel would not notice I had stopped. Within 10 days, my thinking began to clear. Within 3 weeks, I felt more like myself than I had in months. The clearing of my head was both a relief and a devastation, because suddenly I could see everything I had not been able to see before. I could see the way Sandra watched me at meals, assessing. The way Daniel sometimes left papers on the kitchen table at angles that suggested they had been left for me to find, to sign, to glance at without reading. The way they spoke to me in the careful, slightly raised voices that people use with the very old or the very confused. The way they had been, for over a year, slowly and methodically dismantling my life. Rebecca told me later that she had first spoken to the police fraud unit in Wellington 6 weeks before that night. They had referred her to Christchurch. The detective assigned to the case had been quiet and thorough and had spent 4 weeks building the file before anything moved. I stood in my downstairs bathroom in the dark, in my dressing gown, holding my phone and listening to my daughter breathe, and I waited. I counted the seconds without meaning to. At 13 minutes past midnight, I heard a firm knock at the front door. I heard Daniel's voice, groggy and confused, then clearer and sharper. I heard Sandra say something I could not make out. I heard the particular authority of voices that do not need to raise themselves to be understood. Rebecca said, "That's them, Dad. You can come out now." I unlocked the bathroom door and walked down the hall. Daniel was standing in the entryway in track pants and a t-shirt, and there were 2 police officers with him and a woman in plain clothes who introduced herself as Detective Senior Sergeant Aroha Parada from the Christchurch Serious Fraud Team. She had a calm, unhurried manner, and she looked at me with the particular expression of someone who has seen too many families in too many hallways and has learned not to judge the shock on their faces. Daniel looked at me. I do not know what he expected to see. The slow, confused old man he had been cultivating. Perhaps the father who forgot things and needed help with the bank statements. The man who would have stood there in bewilderment while they explained what was happening. Instead, he saw me looking back at him clearly. "Dad," he said. "Daniel." Detective Parada spoke his name with a flat finality that stopped him mid-sentence. "I need you to come with us. Please." Sandra had appeared behind him. She looked at me with something I could not name and have not been able to name since. It was not guilt. Exactly. It was not defiance. It was the expression of someone recalculating, rapidly, the outcome of a plan. The plan had not included a daughter who was a litigation solicitor, who had a pharmacist friend in Wellington, who called her father every Sunday and paid attention to the quality of his voice. They were taken to the Christchurch Central Police Station that night. Bail was granted the following morning, with conditions that included no contact with me and no access to any accounts in my name. The real estate agent who had arranged the private sale was interviewed the following day. The solicitor in Rangiora who had drawn up the fraudulent power of attorney was interviewed the following week. Both, it emerged, had varying degrees of knowledge about what they were facilitating. Both faced their own consequences in the months that followed. Rebecca drove down from Wellington that Wednesday morning. She arrived at 11:30 and I was standing at the front door when her car pulled into the drive, the same way I used to stand at the door when she came home from university. She got out and walked across the lawn, and she looked so much like her mother, the same dark hair, the same way of setting her jaw when she was holding herself together, that I had to look away for a moment. She walked into my arms and held on hard. "I should have called sooner," she said into my shoulder. "You called when it mattered," I said. We stayed like that for a while, in the cold morning air, in front of the house that Daniel had been planning to sell out from under me in 3 weeks. The legal process took most of a year. Daniel and Sandra were charged with fraud, obtaining by deception, and willful damage the fraudulent power of attorney. Daniel faced an additional charge related to the administered substances. His solicitor argued several mitigating factors. The judge, a careful woman in her late 50s, listened to them all and was not particularly moved. Daniel received 4 years and 3 months. Sandra received 2 years, with 9 months served in the community under strict conditions. I attended every day of the sentencing hearing. I sat in the 3rd row, next to Rebecca, who held my hand without acknowledging that she was holding it. When the judge read the sentence, Daniel looked over his shoulder at me. I do not know what he was looking for. I did not look away. There are things I have had to sit with since then. Things that do not resolve neatly, regardless of how cleanly the court proceedings concluded. I have had to sit with the fact that I trusted him, not naively, not blindly, but genuinely, and with full knowledge of who he was, because he was my son, and I had known him his entire life, and I did not believe I could not have believed, before it happened, that the person who rang me from Dunedin at 2 in the morning, because his marriage was ending, could also be the person who sat across from me at the breakfast table each day, passing me tablets that were slowly pulling my mind apart. I have had to sit with the grief of it, which is different from anger and sits deeper. I grieved Patricia. I know what grief feels like. This was its own particular shape. I have also had to reckon with something I find harder to say. In the months when the tablets were working, when I was sleeping 12 hours and losing words and sitting in my armchair watching the garden without really seeing it, I was not making decisions. I was not managing my own affairs. I was, in the most practical sense, exactly what Daniel had been telling anyone who would listen that I was: an elderly man in decline, unable to care for himself, in need of someone else to take charge. The thing about being stripped of your capacity, even temporarily, even by chemical means, is that you do not know it is happening. That is the design of it. You simply feel tired and foggy and you think, well, I am 68, and perhaps this is simply what 68 feels like. You do not reach for the thought that someone is doing this to you, because the someone in question is passing you toast at breakfast and asking if you slept all right. I tell you this not to frighten you. I tell you this because the man who reads this and thinks it could not happen to him is the most likely candidate. There are things I did not have in place that I should have had. I did not have a solicitor of my own, separate from any family member. I did not have an independent person reviewing my finances. I did not have a clear, documented, written record of my wishes regarding my estate and my property. I had trusted that family meant safety. Family can mean safety. Rebecca is the proof of that. But trust without structure is not protection. It is vulnerability with a warm face on it. If you have a child helping with your finances, have a second person, a solicitor, an accountant, a trusted friend who also has visibility, not because you suspect your child, but because accountability protects everyone, including the child. It removes temptation. It removes opportunity. It removes the slow, quiet drift toward rationalization that seems to affect even people who would never describe themselves as capable of what Daniel did. If someone close to you suggests they move in to help, have a conversation, a real one, with a written record about what that arrangement looks like, how long it lasts, and what each person's responsibilities are. Verbal agreements inside families dissolve in the retelling. If your thinking changes, if you feel foggy, slow, more confused than your age should account for, ask someone outside your household to look at your medications. Ask your GP directly. In a consultation, your family member does not attend. And if your children call you late at night, answer. Rebecca still calls every Sunday. We talk for an hour, sometimes longer. She asks what I have been reading, what the weather has been doing, whether I have been to bowls. I ask about her cases, her flat in Wellington, the man she has been seeing who seems decent and makes her laugh. Last month she drove down for the long weekend and we planted a lemon tree in the back corner of the garden, near the fence where Patricia always said she wanted one. We worked in the afternoon light, the two of us, taking turns with the spade. I thought about Daniel. I thought about Patricia. I thought about all the versions of a life that almost did not happen the way it should have. Then I thought about a midnight phone call, and a daughter who paid attention, and a bathroom door locked from the inside. Sometimes the people who love you cannot explain themselves. They can only say, and sometimes that is enough.